And get started, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. We're going to have SPP 101, everything you ever wanted to know about SPP. I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Sam Laudenslager. Sam and I go back 15 years, at least in our old telco days. And as most of you know, telco's kind of gone by the wayside as far as regulations, so we're kind of on different paths right now, but we still get to meet and interact every once in a while. So,
Yep.
Sam?
So yeah, my name's Sam Laudenslager. I've been with Southwest Power Pool for 6 years, I guess. And before that, I was with the Arkansas Public Service Commission for 28 years. And worked with Adam when I was at the commission and on SPP stuff. So anyway, I've got a couple of guys with me. Justin Hinton, who's a lawyer with the company, and Lee Elliott, who's going to take my place with the company when I walk away from this stuff. Try. So we're just going to hit, it's an overview, like Natal said. It's fairly high level. When we hit the markets piece, I'll probably hit my little bit of a high-level overview of the markets, then hand it over to Keith. He'll go into what the market monitor does. In fact, Keith, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Keith Collins. I'm the market monitor at SPP. I've been there for about a year. Before that, I was with the California ISO for several years. So happy to be here today. And with me is Sir Hot Cooney. He was with the Massachusetts Commission for a while. And we look forward to having a good presentation. Thank you.
So I guess it was last year, Keith and I were talking, and it dawned on me that it probably would be a good idea to get the market monitor out into the states so that the states could see what a market monitor looks like. And he could talk to you about what he does. So this is the second state. He was with us in Iowa last month. So anyway, so what do I need to do here?
That's wrong one, Sam.
So this is our agenda. We're going to focus a little bit on the roles and responsibilities of the states and SPP. We talk about markets and planning and themes issues and the holistic, whatever it's called, holistic integrated task. The hit. Task. Okay. Anyway, we'll go into all that. Let's see. So our mission statement is pretty simple. It's helping our members work together to keep the lights on today and in the future. But it's critical to how we see ourselves and how we do what we do. The markets are a relatively recent thing for SPP, but reliability and keeping the lights on has been kind of our focus and our purpose for 50 years, 75 years. But what's important here is we don't do it. We help our members do it. We've got about 97 members at this point. And we help them deal with issues that come up in order to keep the lights on for their customers. And it's not just for today, but also in the future. So it's forward-looking as well as looking at things today. So right after World War II started, SPP was created as literally a power pool. There is a bauxite. Arkansas is one of the largest sources of bauxite in the country. Bauxite's critical in the manufacture of aluminum, and aluminum was critical in the manufacture of planes back in the day. And but there wasn't enough power being generated in Arkansas to run the aluminum plant, which was south of Little Rock, 24/7. So a number of utilities kind of pooled their resources, if you will, in order to make that happen. It was so successful that after the war they said, well, let's keep doing this. This makes sense. And so that's literally where we got started. There's two other entities that got started in a similar fashion in World War II. One is the Northwest Power Pool, which operates in the northwestern part of the country, and the other one is the Bonneville Power Administration, BPA. I didn't know that until last year, so trivia. So we see ourselves as being a little bit different than other ISOs and RTOs. We're relationship-based, we're member-driven. We see ourselves as being independent through our diverse membership. We are evolutionary, not revolutionary, which means we're the last ISO RTO to do something new. Everybody else will do it before us, and we learn from their mistakes. And reliability and economics are inseparable. I used to tell my boss back when I was with the commission that reliability and economics projects, the only difference is the time. That today's economic projects are tomorrow's reliability projects. So it's just a function of time. But SPP sees those two items as being inseparable. You guys jump in whenever you want to, okay? So these are the services that we provide for our members, and everything we do is for our members. We facilitate meetings, and we help them with the decision-making process. Adam's a witness to how many meetings we have. We monitor the grid to make sure that reliability is being maintained. Process for requests for use of the grid under our tariff. Operate a wholesale energy market. We ensure that users, owners, and operators of the bulk transmission system comply with federal reliability standards coming from NERC. And we plan for our future, our members' future transmission needs. We focus on being regional, independent, cost-effective. And our overarching goal, well, the thing that we shoot for in everything we do, is to maintain reliability. A couple of years ago, we did an analysis to kind of figure out what the value of SPP was and how it breaks down. And this slide kind of talks a little bit about that. We see that annually we generate about a $1.7 billion net benefits to our members. And this is basically stuff that the members would have to do if we weren't there to do it for them. And we can do it on a more cost-effective basis than they can do it themselves. But we see that we do this at a kind of a benefit cost ratio of 11 to 1. Based on the services that we provide and what we do for our members, we calculate that a typical residential customer would save about $5 to $6 a month because of what we do for our members. And it breaks down this way. Markets provide about 35% of the benefits. The transmission that is built provides about 33%. Operations and reliability is about 31%, and the remaining 2% is just from services, other services that we provide. I'm not going to go through all these. These are important milestones for the company. We became a NERC regional council back in 1968. For y'all that weren't around, and most of you weren't back in 1968, there was a New York City blackout that occurred back then, which is the reason that everybody started focusing on reliability for electric utilities. NERC was created. We became one of their initial members. We were incorporated as a nonprofit back in 1994. Up until that time, we had operated basically with our members as a handshake. We had nothing signed or anything, no sort of written agreements at all until 1994. We started providing reliability coordination services back in 1997. We implemented our open access tariff in 1998. In 2004, after 3 tries, we became a FERC-approved RTO. In 2007, we implemented our imbalance market. And let's see, 2014, we started our integrated marketplace, day ahead and real-time markets. And that's it. We are incorporated in Arkansas, and we've always been located in Little Rock. even though we receive electricity services from a company that's not a member, which is kind of interesting. Entergy is our utility at SPP, and they are not a member. They used to be a member, and they walked away in '97 when we decided to start our open access transmission tariff. They didn't want any part of it, so they walked away. And now they're a member of MISO. We're regulated by FERC. Again, we were approved as an RTO in 2004. We operate subject to a tariff that FERC has approved. And it's got probably, I hadn't looked lately, 6,000 or 7,000 pages in the tariff. You guys are used to that stuff. And it contains our terms and conditions for providing service within and across the footprint. Like I said, we were a founding member of NERC, and we had been a regional entity from 2007, but we shut that operation down as of June of this year. And let's see, what else? I guess that's it. So, like I said, we have 97 members, and it's a pretty diverse membership. We're the only RTO with a federal agency that's a member, and that's the Western Area Power Administration. Their Upper Great Plains region is a member of SPP. Walmart recently joined. They're our one large retail customer member, but it's pretty diverse, which causes all kinds of problems, as you might imagine. Trying to reach consensus amongst this kind of diverse membership can be difficult. Okay. So this is the growth of ISOs, RTOs. I'm not sure if I like this series of slides or not, so y'all can let me know at a break or sometime whether you like them, because if you don't, I probably won't include them in future presentations. The ISO RTO world started in 1996 with the birth of ERCOT down in Texas, and then it spread a little bit a couple of years later to ISO New England in 97 and California ISO in 98. Then in 1999, the New York ISO was created. And then things really started moving. MISO was created in 2001, and Adam, I don't remember what the Canadian ISO's called, but those guys up there, they were created in 2002. And then 2004, we were approved. PJM has been around for a little bit. It just shows how new areas of the country were joining RTOs at this point. And the light spots on the map, here, all over, they're part of the California ISO's energy imbalance market. They're not members of Cal ISO, but they participate in the imbalance market out in California. All right. Did y'all like that series or not? Yeah.
Before you move on, can you talk about the blue space in Missouri?
Co-op, AECI, kind of the dark hole is the way I've always described it in Missouri. AECI has made some movement over the years to become part of an RTO, but they've never actually taken the plunge. They talk about it, but they talk about either joining MISO or SPP. And I guess last year was the most recent time they talked seriously about it, but then they decided not to make any decisions yet. Back in around 2003, 2004, FERC had a goal of making all parts of the country part of an RTO. And it was called standard market design was the mechanism they used to try to do that. It backfired on FERC, frankly. Politics blew up in front of Chairman Wood, and particularly because of two regions of the country, the Southeast and the Northwest. didn't want any part of an RTO. And as you can see, they're still not part of an RTO. I think that'll change over time, but one of those miscalculations by FERC. So this is what the RTOs look like today. Generally, the hash marks indicate areas that have members in both SPP and MISO, or in ERCOT and SPP. And we're seeing a lot of activity around our border with ERCOT. We've got members in SPP that are putting their facilities, trying to move all their facilities under the ERCOT market. And the reason for that is prices. Prices are a lot higher down there than what we see in SPP. Okay. And we've got members in 14 states at this point, and we'll talk a little bit about how we see the future in SPP. The original states were New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. And I think we'll talk later about how we expanded further up in the north. Anyway, this is our operating region. It's kind of a transmission map. Shows you the miles of transmission. And what we've done since I've been involved with SPP, our members have spent a lot of time and money trying to figure out how to integrate the transmission system so that it's much better integrated north to south as well as west to east. And the reasons for the west to east are to make sure that, SPS, one of our members, was found by FERC to have market power because they were basically isolated down in West Texas and eastern New Mexico. So we had a goal of trying to build enough transmission to make sure that they were fully integrated with the rest of our region. But the other thing in SPP is wind. We have a lot of wind in the western part of our footprint, and there was very little transmission when our members tried to start harvesting that wind back in the day. And so we've spent a lot of money building our transmission system in order to harvest that wind and move it to the loads, which are in the eastern part of our footprint. Here's some information about Missouri. This is what our kind of our energy footprint looks like by fuel type. We're still about 30% coal. Wind continues to increase. It's at 20%. We're starting to see solar increase a little bit within our region. We only have, I think, one nuke. I'm not sure. Adam, is that in Missouri?
It's just in Kansas.
Okay. Got a little bit of hydro. When the integrated system became members back a couple of years ago, they increased our hydro resources significantly. But gas is what we lean on, particularly with the wind. And this shows the capacity by state, those fuel sources by state. So if you look at Missouri, it's, I don't know that I can read that. It's coal and gas. A little bit of other, I don't know what that is in Missouri, but, and some wind. And this is another breakdown. It's a state contribution to each of those fuel sources. And this is what's actually produced by those fuel types. So coal makes up about 46%, and gas is 19.5%. Let's see what else is significant here. Wind's 22.7%. So those are the three major fuel types. So each of the RTOs have what they call a generation interconnection queue, if you will. And this slide just basically tells you what's in our queue. This is resources that may or may not be built at some point. GIQ is problematic for all RTOs, always has been. And PERC is trying to sort out right now how to solve some of the GIQ problems. But as you'll see, we have 53 gigs of wind in our GIQ. Now, will all that come online? No. Will some of it? Yeah. Do we know how much? No. So it's just going to increase. But solar is the other thing that I'd point to here, because it is we're starting to see a significant increase in solar in the region. This is in SPP. This is utility grade solar. It's not rooftop solar or solar farms. This is utility grade solar.
Can you explain what GI is before you move on?
Generation interconnection. In order to connect your generator to the SPP system, you have to go through an interconnection process, if you will. And the tariff outlines what that process looks like. And these studies that we do can last for literally years. And because as soon as somebody pulls out of they clump all the studies into one group at a certain point in time. And if somebody pulls out of that clump, we have to start over again. So, I mean, Adam, I don't know how long these things last, but 2 to 3 years. And they're quicker now than they used to be, frankly. But we need a better way to, in my view, basically weed folks out at the front end that really aren't serious about building. They're just curious about it. But there are all sorts of rules and regulations about that, so it's very difficult to just do that weeding out on the front end. If you tell somebody, well, we're going to charge you X amount of dollars, so you can see kind of a rough estimate of what it would cost you to connect to our grid, the guys that are small say, well, we can't afford to pay that. So you're kind of stuck. And we got a lot of small members too, so. But the company's tried in a couple of cases in the last 10 years to improve the GIQ study process, and it's very difficult. That's one of the issues that we'll talk about, touch base with that the HITT is looking at right now. Anything else, Adam? Thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about how we're governed, because we're different. We're governed differently than the other RTOs. And let me say this on the front end. While SPP and MISO, people often point out that we're not able to get along. What I would say is we have different ways of doing what we do. And each way works for the respective company. They're just different. They're just different. But they both work. So this is kind of a slide showing our working groups and committees. At the top left corner is the board of directors and our members committee. They sit together, they meet together, they address issues as a group. Typically what happens at a board meeting, if there's a motion, a resolution to deal with something, the members committee will vote first, and it's about, how many members on the members committee? You all know? 11 to 17, okay? And the members committee will vote first, and it's done by a show of hands, and then the board will vote, and the board votes by secret ballot. And at some point during the course of the board of directors meeting, my boss will say, the motion was approved, or the motion failed, and that's it. You don't know what the board vote was like at all.
Say on that members committee though, that's just getting the feeling of what the members are wanting. I mean, that's not a binding vote.
Yeah, but that's true, but I mean, the board is engaged with the members in other meetings as well, and so they know kind of where the members are coming from on an issue, so it's no surprise when the members committee votes the way they do. But Lee's right. They're able to get a sense of kind of where the members are coming from on a given issue. There's an annual membership meeting that takes place, I think, in October. But underneath the board of directors, those are pretty common committees that you'll see with boards. These are committees that report to the board. And across the top are some different things. This is a mistake. That should have a big X on it because it doesn't exist anymore in SPP. But the thing that makes us a little different from my perspective is the Regional State Committee and the role that it plays within SPP, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. The Oversight Committee, and that's what Keith reports to directly. He doesn't go through any of the officer team. He reports directly to the Oversight Committee, and he'll talk about that. We have our Strategic Planning Committee, our Markets and Operations Policy Committee, or MOPSI, and it's kind of the technical committee for the company, and all these working groups and committees report to MOPSI. And then we got SPP staff. My boss is quick to point out that our members vote on everything. We don't vote on anything. We have one staff person that votes, and that's because he's a member of the board of directors, and that's our CEO. But other than Nick Brown, we just try to facilitate issues, try to get our members to reach consensus on various issues, and basically that's it. We run the meetings. For each of these committees, an SPP staff person is the secretary, which means just what you think. I mean, we set up the meetings, we make sure that everything happens, we make sure food's provided, we make sure the agenda gets out on a timely basis, make sure the meeting materials get out on a timely basis. But other than that, I mean, that's what we do. We don't vote on a thing. This is our board of directors. There's just been some pretty significant changes in the board of directors too. These two gentlemen, Jim Elkelberger and Harry Skelton, have been around SPP, have been part of the board since the late 90s. They were recently moved into, what was it called, emeritus status, and Larry Elton Balmer was named the chairman of the board, with Graham Edwards as vice chair. I anticipate there are going to be further changes in the board of directors in the next year. Phyllis will probably be retiring, as will Julian. I keep hearing that Nick's going to retire sometime in the next couple of years. We'll see. But Larry comes out of the utility industry. He was a IT guy in a Illinois utility before he retired. Graham Edwards has been CEO of a couple of utilities in the Southeast and the Carolinas, but he was also the chairman of MISO for a period of time. And then we were fortunate enough to get him to become part of our board. Phyllis is a lawyer, and she's got a career of teaching and dispute resolution. She was in Oklahoma forever. She moved to Washington State recently. Julian has a co-op background. Mark Christen comes from a municipal electric background, if you will. Jim Elkelberger, who, like I said, is emeritus member of the board. He was a retired admiral in the Navy. Josh Martin came out of Bell Atlantic. He's a lawyer. And Bruce Shears, an ag economist, a PhD, who talks about us having kind of faux markets, not real markets, because he's used to dealing with agricultural markets. And then Harry Skelton comes out of he was the CEO of a metering company, a company that actually manufactured meters. So it's a fairly diverse group. We don't have any age requirements on our board, and we don't have any kind of years served requirements on the board, so that's why Jim and Harry have been around for so long. Oh, well, there's the members committee. As you can see, it's fairly diverse as well.
Imagine Walmart will be added to that at some point.
Yeah, they will be. They'll have to be. Justin said Walmart. And if you look at our bylaws, it spells out who's represented on the members committee, and there's, I'm sure, a spot for a large retail customer to be a part of our members committee. Yeah.
That one's filled.
I don't know when they actually do that, though. Probably. Our annual meeting's in October, so it probably happens then. Anyway. So let's talk about the regionals. Y'all have any questions on everything, about who we are, how we do what we do, any of that sort of thing? Yeah,
I'm kind of confused on what you do.
we facilitate. That's what we do, basically. We facilitate trying to reach consensus on various issues that come up amongst our members. So,
Are you talking about SPP?
Yeah.
Yes, in general.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
step back to the transmissions.
so yeah, we manage, we've been described as kind of the air traffic controller of the electric transmission system for our region. We don't own anything. Well, we own a building now at this point, but we direct what transmission will be built within our region and who will build it. We also created markets within our region for the members' benefit, which relates back to you guys and what you do, because it means you're going to have electricity at a cheaper price than you would otherwise have it. Does that help?
But, I
Well,
mean, we don't own anything. We manage the grid to make sure that the lights stay on, but we don't
Right.
own it. We tell what needs to be built in order to continue that reliability, to continue to make sure that we've got reliable service to the various things. And so that's kind of what we do, is direct it all.
Hey Lee, can you turn on the
Courtney?
microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, there's a button. Does it work?
So,
Kansas City Power and Light, GMO, and Empire are all members of SPP.
right.
And so that's,
City of Springfield's a member.
Right. Our utilities are a member of SPP, Airman's a member of MISO. And so they do what they're describing for Kansas City Power and Light, GMO, and Empire.
And on a real-time basis, we're matching generation over here.
Mike.
You're matching generation to load, basically, on a real-time basis. So at all times, in our footprint, we're trying to balance that. And also, in a day-ahead market we're also, at that time, balancing load to generation. And it goes every 5 minutes, we're doing this. I guess every 5 seconds, we're doing that.
But the main thing we do is make sure that we have a reliable electric system.
Right.
Reliability, make sure the lights stay on is our number one priority. And everything else we do is kind of supports that, if you will. Yeah.
And I think the one key factor is you try to do it and organize which resources are used and how they're transported through what lines to make it as economical as possible.
Yeah, and that, again, those
That's the
savings
key
flow back through to
reasoning.
Missouri ratepayers through y'all's fuel adjustment clause, I would imagine. That's the way it's done in Arkansas, so it's the way it's done in most states. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
Anything else before we move on into the RSC? All right.
Good question.
So the Regional State Committee. The Regional State Committee was approved by FERC the same time that SPP was approved by FERC as a regional transmission organization back in 2003, 2004. Our Regional State Committee is, as I said, they're very unique. They don't report to the board, but they will talk to the board about what they've been doing in terms of their activities. They're independent, very independent, and they're made up of one state rep, one representative from each of the states that we operate within. So if you set the rates for a utility, or if you site transmission, you have the opportunity, and you're a commissioner, you have the opportunity to be on the Regional State Committee. This is the current RSC. A lot of turnover in this group. If y'all have been with the commission any length of time, you know how that happens. Turnover is just, it's just part of it. Scott Roop from Missouri joined the RSC in January. Before then, it had been Steve Stoll. So Commissioner Roop's new. Deanna Walker joined late last year, she's new. Jerry Hauser joined last year. Dennis Scrennan joined last year. Foster Campbell joined a couple of months ago. Randy Chrisman from North Dakota was last year. Kim O'Brien was from about 18 months ago. So one of the things we do, my group does at SPP, is we try to get out and meet with commissions on an annual basis. And a lot of times we'll try to make time to meet with the staff as well, because we know you guys don't do transmission 24/7. And it's helpful to have folks come in and provide refreshers, if you will. I don't know how things are structured here in Missouri really in any detail, but I know in Arkansas, I worked for the commissioners. I headed up a group that was basically their advisory staff, and we didn't interact with the staff of the commission, if you will. We helped the commission write orders, we helped them kind of come to decisions, we helped them operate within the RTOs, we helped them at FERC. But there was a clear line that kind of separated my group from the rest of the staff. And my impression is that's similar here in Missouri, which can be uncomfortable, but also necessary. Anyway, so my point in this is we have a lot of new people on the Regional State Committee, a whole lot of new. And I think it's imperative that we, in my department, gets out and helps you guys understand what it is we do and how we do it, because y'all are going to be here long after these guys leave. These are the members again, and one of the things I didn't point out, the Regional State Committee has one working group that reports to it, and that's the Cost Allocation Working Group. It's named that just because when it was created, that's what it did, was cost allocation, trying to come up with cost allocation methodologies for the region. That's not the only thing the CAWG does, but at the beginning that was the primary thing that they did. And these are the CAWG representatives. There's, again, one from each state. That's one voting member from each state. Oftentimes we'll have multiple representatives from the state show up at the CAWG meetings. The CAWG meets every month. I think it's like the first Tuesday of the month, is that right?
It depends.
Ish. And a lot of these guys have been around for quite a while. Adam's the longest serving member of CAWG. And I'll just go through the background. Cindy Ireland from Arkansas is an accountant, basically. Scott Bentz is he's an accountant too, I believe. Engineer. Christine, I don't know, she comes from a business background. She's been at the Kansas Commission for a long time. Lane Sisson is a consultant for the Louisiana Commission. I don't know what Lane's background is, finance, I believe. Adam, y'all know Adam, I'm not going to talk about him. John Krasky is an engineer, consultant, works for the Nebraska Power Review Board. Nebraska's interesting. They have public power districts in the state of Nebraska. They don't have investor-owned utilities or co-ops. And they've been that way since 70, 80 years. It's been a long time. There is a Nebraska Public Service Commission, but they don't regulate the electric utilities. And the Power Review Board, what they do in Nebraska is basically approve siting, transmission and generation. That's it. So because they cite, they have that authority, the Nebraska Power Review Board is the entity that represents the state of Nebraska. New Mexico, Commissioner Pat Lyons and Heidi Pitts is a PhD economist. Victor Shook with North Dakota, he's an accountant. Jason Chaplin is, what's Jason's background?
You say auditor.
Auditor, okay. Greg Rizloff from South Dakota is an engineer, and Shawnee Claiborne Pinto, she was a Missouri native at one point in her life, is down in Texas, and she's an economist. The RSC meets quarterly. Our board meets the last Tuesday of the month on a quarterly basis. So that's January, April, July, and October are the months that the board meets, and they meet the last Tuesday of that month. The RSC meets the Monday afternoon before the board meeting. And the RSC over the last 3 or 4 years has had what they call an educational session that takes place on Monday morning. And the RSC meetings are open. Anybody can address the RSC that wants to. It's an interesting group. This just slide points out who the original state members were of the RSC and other entities that have joined. The only state that could participate that has declined to participate up to this point, Louisiana could have been a member back, could have been one of the original members, but they declined to participate in the Regional State Committee until this year. They've been very active in MISO, but not in SPP. In fact, we've got one of the commissioners, our RSC member from Louisiana, is coming to Little Rock tomorrow to meet with us. We're going to do basically the same thing with him because he doesn't know anything about who we are. Most states that are split into 2 RTOs or more have different commissioners that are responsible for the activities in the different RTOs. I think Chairman Hall is y'all's OMS rep in MISO, and again, Commissioner Roop is the RSC rep in SPP. See a similar thing in Texas and in Iowa and in Arkansas, where you've got different commissioners focusing on different RTOs. Share the pain. Nebraska joined in 2009 when 3 of the power districts and a muni and Nebraska became members of SPP. And then Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota joined in October of 2015 when the integrated system became members of SPP. And then, as I said, Louisiana joined. The one state that could participate that has declined to participate is Minnesota. All right. So this is what makes the RSC unique from other state organizations that participate in RTOs. They have very distinct authorities under our bylaws. They have, they're the ones that decide what cost allocations methodologies are going to be used in SPP. They decide how financial transmission rights, it's an archaic term, but this was a term that was the term of note back in the day. They decide how FTRs will be allocated. They are informed and help guide the planning for remote resources. People always ask me, what does remote resource mean? It means wind. You were around 2004, we were afraid that there was going to be a big build out for wind, and some states didn't want to see their state ratepayers pay for that transmission because they didn't see that there'd be much benefit. And then the last thing they do is they determine resource adequacy for the region. And most of these authorities have really focused on cost allocation. They've used cost allocation. They've used that authority more than any other authority that they have. Last year, the year before, they used their authority over resource adequacy when they approved our reserve margin for the region. The important part of this is that as the RSC reaches decisions on any methodologies that will be used to address these areas of authority, we have to file that. We don't have any choice. Now, the board can direct us to follow an alternative methodology, but we've never done that. And as I point out, when we do that, we got bigger problems with different methodologies. We're not talking to each other. We are not doing our role to facilitate the discussion amongst our members. Oh, this is the number of times the authority's been used. So they've used cost allocation. That was the point I was trying to make, more than any of the other authorities. FTRs, once they got the, our system up for FTRs, the RSC has basically stepped back from that. They still have the authority, but a lot of the issues and conversations around FTRs these days are really pretty technical, and commissions don't typically want to weigh in on those things. And then resource adequacy, as I said, they just did that a year or two ago. Questions?
How often do they do the cost allocation?
It's a good question. We're going to get right into that. Okay. So these are our current cost allocation methods. And these are the schedules and the tariff that you'll find this information. You can go to spp.org. You can go to our tariff and find all of this information. But the original base plan for cost allocation was developed by the RSC back in 2005, 2004. The balanced portfolio was a cost allocation methodology we used. And it is coming to an end soon. But that was developed by the RSC, and our highway byway cost allocation was also developed by the RSC. You also see point-to-point service and then direct assignment. Our zonal revenue requirement, the annual transmission revenue requirement, includes facilities that were built by our TOs before they became part of the RTO. It also includes any kind of rebuilds, upgrades, and the annual transmission revenue requirement, ATRR, is we've got 18 pricing zones in SPP. It's approximately 1.3 billion. And who bears the cost? We've got point-to-point customers pay a rate, per megawatt rate for the zone where their load is located. And then network customers bear the greater share. And within each zone, they bear a load ratio share of the ATRR for the zone that their load is located within. Okay. So there's the zonal ATRR. As I said, it's about 1.3 billion total. It's zonal, so none of that's allocated across the region. It's all allocated to the local zone. And it makes up about 57% of our ATRR. Have you seen these slides before, Adam?
No, but
They're kind of new.
could you explain what a zone is and what the ATRR is?
Yeah, so we've got like 18 or 17 pricing zones within SPP. And they're basically a function of history, if you will. Those are basically the service territories of some of our members over time. They change, and one of our big issues that we have difficulty reaching consensus on these days is what we call zone placement. Typically when a city, what we've been seeing, and you'll keep me honest, is when one of our, a city within our region decides that it doesn't want to have to be responsible for maintaining, keeping the facilities up to NERC standards, they will sell those facilities off to another company. And those companies aren't the traditional utility companies, but they will roll the cost of those facilities, basically the revenue requirement associated with those facilities, into a local zone, which oftentimes causes the rates for everybody else within that zone to increase, right? So there are a number of objections by the existing zonal members to this whole process.
Can we go to slide 62 and pull up the zone map, by chance?
Only for you, Ed. So this is what I'm talking about when I say pricing zones. The transmission zones, pricing zones, I use those words interchangeably. They're not exactly the same, but for my purposes, they work. So these are the zones, and you can see we've had some issues with KCP&L, GMO, with some cities that wanted to place facilities within their zone. That was in the last year. We've seen issues in Nebraska. when we try to place facilities there, within NPPD zone. But anyway, this is a co-op in Arkansas. It's kind of weird. I don't even think this is correct, but that's what our map shows. But these are the 17 transmission zones, and those are pricing. Does that help?
Does the SRC make the decision on any kind of disputes about zones or where they are or how they should be completed?
They don't. If you're a commissioner, you don't want to get into that fight.
So who makes those decisions on the zones?
The members try to reach a consensus on it, and ultimately the board makes a decision. Well, actually, ultimately FERC makes a decision, because we have to file all those with FERC.
And does the SPP the board make a position on what it should be?
Typically, yeah, they do, yeah.
And to go back to your cost allocation question, they do come up with how new enhancements are allocated zonally or regionally in the cost allocation methodology that CALL came up with. They did decide that, or the RSC did. And I think you'll go through that here in a second.
Yep.
And could you explain revenue requirement just once more?
Don't know revenue requirement.
Well, just the way it works here is a little bit different with SPP.
So as facilities are placed into service, whatever costs are associated with those facilities become part of the regional revenue requirement. And you got the revenue requirement and a return, and that results in our transmission rates at the end of the day. So, all right.
Do you have a question?
So does each zone have a different revenue requirement?
Yeah,
Okay. And is that based on
the cost.
the facilities that are in the zone?
Yeah. So our original base plan applies to any upgrades that we directed the construction of from 2005 to 2010. And this is the first cost allocation methodology that the RSC developed and approved. And there's no science to it. It was basically a negotiated result, if you will, so that 33% of the ATRR of those new facilities would be allocated region-wide according to load ratio share, and 67% of the revenue requirement were allocated to the specific zones based on estimates of the associated benefit. Back in the day, we used what was called a megawatt mile analysis. Don't ask me what that is because I can't explain it. Very convoluted, complex is all the best I could do. Yeah?
The fees associated with the ATRRs, how are those billed out to customers? Are those billed out individual schedules, or are those rolled up into the LLP?
It's all, no, it's not by LP, it's all rolled up. Our settlements department basically handles that. They send out settlement statements to each of our members.
And are those identifiable by each schedule?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they break
Because
it.
of the services?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in some cases, our members, we're receiving revenues for our members, and then we'll redistribute that. And sometimes we're issuing bills to our members too. Okay. I think that's all I have on that. Anything else, guys? So this is the amount that was associated with the original base plan. Again, like I said, this was the first cost allocation methodology that the RSC had come up with, and it was nothing more than a negotiated result. And it represents about 11% of our ATRR. Okay. The next cost allocation methodology that they came up with, and all this work is done basically by the staff of the commission, by the CAWG, if you will, because they meet so often, and they're the technical support for the commissioners. They're the ones that develop these cost allocation methods. So the balanced portfolio was directed to a set of upgrades that were supposed to be constructed beginning back in 2009. And it's kind of a weird method that we've only used once, and I hope we'll never use again, because it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. But you were trying to come up with a portfolio of projects that basically balanced benefit to cost across the region. And we never got there. So what we wound up doing was the entities whose benefit to cost was less than one, those companies, they basically allocated a portion of their revenue requirement to the rest of our members, okay? So it was a weird trade-off, and but those are about to end in the next year, 2 years?
2020 is last year.
When I retire, they're gonna retire. So that's me, 2021. But it was a weird cost allocation methodology that worked for the time, but basically it led to the highway byway cost allocation method, if you will. Were y'all around when Mike Proctor was here, Commission? Any of you? Mike was the genius behind the balanced portfolio. And I say that in all due respect. So the balanced portfolio makes up about 5% of our ATR. And then our revised base plan, cost allocation methodology, if you will, is the highway byway. And it applies to any upgrades or new facilities that were directed to be built after June of 2010. So for voltage that's less than 100 kV, 100% of the zone, the costs are allocated 100% to the zone where the facility is going to be constructed. For facilities that are between 100 kV and 300 kV, 67% of the costs are allocated to the zone, and 33% is allocated to the region. And then anything that's greater than 300 kV is allocated 100% region-wide. I don't think any other RTO does anything like this. This is unique to SPP, but it has enabled our members to get a lot of transmission built across our region. We still have issues across the seams, and we'll get into some of that here in a little bit. And the highway byway makes up about 25% of our ATRR today. We also had a situation that came into play where facilities were being built, but the energy from the energy associated with those facilities was being delivered outside the local zone. So basically you had wind being harvested in Kansas, but it was being delivered in, say, in Oklahoma or somewhere else, or Missouri. And there was a feeling that that wasn't equitable situation, because you had so much of the cost being picked up by the local zone with very little benefit accruing to the zone. And so they kind of flipped the highway byway, if you will. It's still in effect, but this is also an issue that's currently in play before the HITT, which I promise we will get to, and I will tell you what that means in a little bit. And then we've got direct assignment, and this is the cost associated with any sort of GI network upgrades, interconnection of any facilities. Those costs are all directly assigned. And then we have revenue credits too. Attachment Z2 of our tariff talks about compensation to entities that were directly assigned cost for network upgrades. And when other entities utilize those facilities, then there are revenue credits that are generated, basically. It has been a very painful and complex process to go through and make this work. It was approved on the tariff side in 2005, and we actually didn't start generating any credits until 2 years ago.
If that, yeah.
Because, I mean, we couldn't make it work. We couldn't make the process that the tariff described work. It was just very convoluted. We currently are still trying to figure out a way to simplify that process, but once people start getting money, they don't want it simplified. Funny how that happens. And 2% of our ATR is associated with those credits. Again, those are the transmission and the pricing zone. And this is the revenue requirement for each zone. You had asked about that, I think. And it breaks it down according to different buckets, cost allocation buckets. Okay. And all this information is available. I'm just going blank at them. It's online, but you can pull down Excel spreadsheets with all of this data.
If you Google triple R file, RRR file, if you ever want this information.
Yeah, if you hear people talk about the triple R file, that's basically this stuff and everything that supports it. Okay. The RSC, though, has, like I said, done more than the 4 areas that they are responsible for. They provided input in a number of different areas. When we started talking about developing an imbalance market, the RSC basically took the lead role in overseeing a cost-benefit study to determine whether or not the imbalance market would provide significant benefits to ratepayers or not. And then once we got that market in place, then our members wanted to start looking at an integrated market, which we'll talk about here in a minute. The RSC endorsed the cost-benefit study that was done to look at the integrated marketplace for SPP. The RSC had members that were part of what we called the Synergistic Project Planning Team, the SPPT. The HITT is very similar to that, but they basically, the work that the SPPT did resulted in our highway-byway cost allocation and our integrated transmission planning process, basically. Again, they approved the balanced portfolio of projects, and when the highway-byway was approved, there was concern by some of the regulators and some of the commissioners about the rate impact of that cost allocation methodology. So they created what was called a rate impact task force to kind of get ahead of what rate increases they might expect from transmission development. And it, I guess they did a couple of different reports, and now they, the rate impact task force is under another group at this point. Once we started estimating cost of projects, our members did, and the cost estimates were poor. The RSC got involved and raised the red flag and said we need to have some controls over project costs, if you will. Some of our members were coming in at 200% over what the project costs had been originally estimated at. And the RSC got the board very interested in that. And then the RSC is also part of the Regional Allocation Review Task Force. Adam's part of that group. He's followed it for years. They basically make sure that there is equity in the benefits and costs from the transmission that gets built and allocated via the highway-byway cost allocation method. They also adopted the inter-regional cost allocation for both the Order 1000 projects as well as non-Order 1000 CEs projects. These are areas that are outside the responsibility of SPP, transmission siting. We don't do that. The states typically do that. Generation planning and siting, transmission or generation construction, and any sort of permitting associated with all that. Okay. How are we doing?
I'm still awake.
I'm barely awake. I hear a drone. Okay. Talk a little bit about markets, and then I'm going to hand it off to somebody that actually knows something about markets, which is our market monitor. I just pretend to know something. So these are some facts about our market. We've got 207 participants in our market. We've got 735 generating resources. Our settlements associated with the marketplace in 2017 equals $16.7 billion. And that's it. So why do markets? Back in around 2003, 2004, the states were really concerned about whether or not the markets would provide benefits to retail ratepayers. And you have to put everything in a kind of a historical context, from my perspective. Back about the same time, you had just seen the California market blow up and resulted in prices being jacked up like we hadn't seen before. And it made our regulators in our region very skeptical of any benefits of the markets. So what SPP did was they asked the RSC, as I said, to kind of be the point for a cost-benefit analysis to see what a imbalance market might provide. And we did that. And Charles Rivers, an associate, was a consultant that was contracted with to do the study under the oversight of the RSC. And they estimated a benefit of the imbalance market of $61 million a year over 10 years. What they actually saw was something a lot greater than that. The last year of the imbalance market, they saw like $170 million in benefits, net benefits. So once our members started seeing those benefits of an imbalance market, they wanted us to look at the possibility of providing an integrated market, which means day ahead offers. And so we looked at that, and it looked like it would be about $100 million a year in benefit. Yep.
What causes those benefits?
More efficient use of the generating resources within the region. Meaning now KCP&L doesn't have to rely on KCP&L's generators to meet its load. Instead, they can rely on generators across the region, the lowest price generators across the region, to match their load. And that's true for all of our members. Thanks. And again, those benefits flow through, in most states, the fuel adjustment clause. I don't know how y'all do it here, but so this is kind of a messy graph, but it shows the energy savings via the market over the last 6 years. Again, the expected savings of 61 million from the imbalance market. That was greatly exceeded. But the blue line represents that estimate. The results are reflected in the, whatever color that is, orange, I guess, brown. And then the kind of the triangle is the combination over time of those benefits. So it's $1.1 billion that ratepayers have seen the benefit of. So, you know, we talk about the markets when we typically talk about the integrated marketplace, but we actually operate two different types of markets. We offer a market for transmission service where people buy and sell use of the transmission system, that we oversee that for them. And then we have the integrated market, which is what most people think about when they think of markets. And it's made up of a day-ahead market where resources are committed in the day ahead. And then we have a real-time balancing market because stuff happens from the day ahead to real time. And you've got to have resources available to deal with whatever stuff might be happening. So, transmission service. Basically, one of our members will reserve transmission service. An analogy is like it's reserving a seat on a plane for a person. Customer lets us know what they want, when they want it, where the resource will be sourced, and where it will sink. Let's see. And if we've got capacity on our system, then our folks down in operations will approve that. They're issued what's called a NERC tag, which is basically the same thing as receiving a boarding pass to get on the plane. And then they create a schedule, which is very similar to actually taking a seat on the plane. And that's how transmission service works in our region, basically. So you reserve the service, you have to specify what you need, when you need it, how much you need. If we've got the availability, that'll be approved. That's it. And then a wholesale energy market is basically made up of sellers and producers and buyers and consumers, and locational prices are determined within the market, and the products that are produced are energy, operating reserves, and congestion rates. Okay. That's what the wholesale energy market looks like. We financially settle the marketplace for everybody that participates. We calculate the prices within the region. And again, we have an independent market monitor that oversees all of this.
If you'll take just a suggestion, if you're bored or have some time on your computer, Google SPP LNP map. You can just watch the prices of different parts of the SPP grid change every 5 minutes or so. So it's like, oh look, it's really cheap up in North Dakota or something like that. So that would give you a better idea of.
Typically, what you'll see are, well, if there are issues on our grid, you'll see hot spots, and we're on one side of a congestion point on the map. Prices are really high, and on the other side of that congestion point, prices are usually really low. But most of our points of congestion typically happen around Oklahoma City these days, right? No?
Further east.
Further east? Kansas City?
Yeah, Kansas City is usually congested, sort of southeast Oklahoma. Used to be further west, but there's...
That's right, but they put that facility in, OG&E put that facility in, thanks. So, but you'll also see congested areas out in the west, out in West Texas and eastern New Mexico sometimes. So, all right. These are the key components and the products that are generated. And I'm not going to talk about this stuff because if you've got questions, he's the guy to ask. This is the way the things work, though. The operating day is October the 8th in this example, and that's when the real-time balancing market comes into play. And the day before, October the 7th, is when you start committing resources into the market. And then after October the 8th is when you basically do the settlements for all the marketplace activity. It's actually fairly simple. We've seen our markets provide over $400 million in net savings annually. And again, as Justin asked, that's the result of centralized unit commitment, what we call it, and maintaining reliable operations. And the day-ahead market allows for additional price assurance before real time. And That's it. This looks like the same, or a very similar graph to what I showed a little bit ago. So these are basically the benefits of the market over time. These, I don't know what color that is, green bars represent the cost of our market. The cost of everything it took to get the market started. And we had the market basically paid off within 3 months from the time we actually started providing service through the integrated marketplace. So the payback was very quick. Let's see. Should we go to you now? Or should we, what do you want to do? We didn't talk about this in advance.
We've been going for 75 minutes. Maybe we take a break.
Break?
Back
Yeah,
with Keith.
break and
Okay.
then I'll come back.
Okay.
Let's say 10 minutes. Be back at 10:25.
Yeah.
Annual training.
I'm an economist at the Missouri Commission. I work on the commissioner's side of the wall, but I'm basically the liaison with the Walt Cecil to both MISO and SPP. I would say come ask me a lot of questions, but you should probably talk to Jamie and Natel before you do, because there are some issues with ex parte on the different sides of the wall. Also, before we begin again, one of the things I realized maybe we didn't do at the start is we don't know, or I don't know what you need to know. So like, what are some things that you guys would want? What are some questions you all would want answered, you know, at the end of the presentation? Like, are there any pressing issues involving SPP that you want to know about, charges or planning or anything? Like is there anything that you can kind of frame in your mind? And I know some of you, this is like, you know, asking which letter of the Greek alphabet is most beautiful or something, because, you know, this is a fairly unique topic. But is there anything you all really want to know at the end of the presentation? Yeah.
I have one last question.
Can you use the
Yeah.
mic? Sorry.
So to, like, let's say, an electricity company, they don't have enough, power to generate, electricity for their area or whatever, and they want to buy electricity through SPP, do they have to pay a charge on top of buying electricity to get the electricity from SPP? Hopefully that makes sense.
No,
I'm
it's a good-
nervous talking into a microphone.
No.
So, we were talking a little bit about this earlier. There are fees to be members of SPP, but assume you've paid all those fees. What you need is to have your transmission. Do you have transmission to support that? And then there's the fee of paying for the power to supplement your other resource. So it's really transmission and the energy.
Remember when I talked about people wanting to buy transmission service? That's basically it. Okay.
Remember those two pieces, the
My-
electricity, the energy and the.
Before we get down any of that, I want to know who you guys are and what you do at the commission and how long you've been here. So can we start with you?
Sure. I'm Byron Murray. I'm an economist in the Rate Design and Tariff Unit.
Okay. How long you been with the commission?
I've been with the commission just over 5 years.
Okay. Good. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Courtney Barron. I started June 18th.
Oh, wow.
Right, this year. I'm a utility regulator auditor.
Okay.
Keith Foster, I'm an auditor as well. I've been here for about 10.5 years.
Okay.
Kathy Lucia, I'm a utility regulatory auditor with Energy Resources. I've been here 11 months.
Oh, wow. So you're newbie too. All right.
John Borgmeyer, I'm an attorney in the General Counsel's Office, and I've been with the Commission about 5 years.
Okay.
John Rogers, manage the Energy Resources Department, Long Range Resource Planning, FAC, and Energy Efficiency Programs, 9 years with the Commission.
I'm Rodney Massman. I'm with the General Counsel's Office, and I've been here about 3 years.
Okay. So Adam's already done his bit. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kim Burton. I'm a policy advisor for Commissioner Sully, and I've been with the commission for about 5 years.
Okay.
I'm Bob Berlin. I'm staff counsel. I've been with the commission staff 16 years.
Oh, okay.
Sherilyn Voss, right now I'm the manager of the Regulatory Analysis Department, which handles all the federal stuff,
So that's
including Adam's group.
the advisory staff then? Okay. And
And
how long have you been?
In 2 stints with a break in the middle, close to 20 years, 18.
Congratulations.
I'm Jamie Myers. I'm on the commission staff side. I work with Mattel, and I've been here about 4 years.
Okay.
Chuck Poston, I'm an engineer. I do production cost modeling. Been here in this role for about 3 years, 5 years total.
Okay.
I'm Joe Rowling. I'm an economist in tariff and rate design. Been here about 2 years.
Jacob Robinette, an engineer, gas procurement analysis, been here about 1.5 years.
Ashley Sarver, auditor. I've been here about 4 years.
Okay.
I'm Sean Lange. I'm an engineer with Chuck on production cost modeling, also in the transmission group on the staff side.
What's the transmission group? What does that mean?
The transmission group usually gets assigned to
Siding dockets and stuff like that? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been here for 13 years.
Okay.
Sarah Lange, also in transmission group, do tariff and rate design, been here 12 years.
Okay.
Dana Eves, I'm an auditor at Energy Resources, 16 years.
Lisa Wilhofer, I'm an auditor at Energy Resources. I've been here 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
I'm Brooke Richter, same, I'm an auditor in the Energy Resources Group, and I've been here a little over 4 years.
Okay.
Contessa King, Utility Regulatory Manager, in the Customer Experience Department. I've been with the Commission for 16 years.
Brad Fortson, economist in Energy Resources. Mark Kiesling, I'm in the Energy Resource Department, almost 4 years.
I'm Jennifer Hines. I'm an attorney in the General Counsel Division, and I started at the Commission in 2006, so I guess 12 years.
Okay.
Cedric Truncan, I'm engineering analysis.
So it's still relatively new. This is all like drinking from a firehouse, I'm sure. Steve?
Steve Dotline, my attorney in the staff counsel's office. I've been here almost 39 years.
And I've known him for about 20 of those 31 probably.
Mark Johnson, I'm also attorney in the staff counsel's office. I've been here almost 3 years.
Claire Eubanks, an engineering analysis, 6 years.
Economist, 10 years.
Okay.
Scott Glasgow, customer experience department, 8 years.
Okay. This Drew?
Shelley Brigman, General Counsel, 12 years.
Okay. This Drew?
Manager of Tariff and Rate, Robin Cleethermis, Manager of Tariff and Rate Design with Commission staff. Been here about 6 years.
Okay. The reason I did that was I'm trying to get a sense of how new you guys were and how new this probably was all coming across to you. And also to figure out what you did here at the commission tonight. And it feels like it's a pretty good mix. I was telling Adam and Rodney at the break that I will commit that we will come back every year and do as deep a dive of any of these issues as you guys can stand. And we'll just make sure and do it, like I said, once a year. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Keith.
All right. As we said earlier, my name is Keith Collins. I am the Executive Director of Market Monitoring at SPP. Before I jump into the presentation, let me give you a little bit of my background too, and talk a little bit about why do we have market monitors, what do we do, what's our role, and that's sort of the first part of my presentation. So my background is, before here, I was with the California ISO in their market monitoring department as a manager. And then before that, I was with the FERC Office of Enforcement in Washington, D.C., reviewing, analyzing markets across the country, including California and New York and some of the other ones. And then before that, I was with essentially contracting with the New York Power Pool, which became the New York ISO. We saw on Sam's slide earlier. New York ISO was formed in 1999. I was with them at that time during that process. It was kind of interesting where they hired the company I was with to review the results of the market, and before they went live, and what we did is we looked at it and we said, yes, these aren't working, please don't go live. And so they delayed it a few months. thankfully, but there were still some issues, and that's similar to what we do today as a market monitor. Is we're looking for, part of our role is to look at the effectiveness of the market and the design, and we'll look at that in the presentation. But seeing that there is a wide range of folks in the room here, market monitoring is kind of a, what is a market monitor and why would you have one? And that kind of gets to, I think, our mission statement, which is actually in the SPP tariff itself. You will find this in the tariff, and really we're there. Every RTO ISO has a market monitor. MISO does. There's a different structure, and FERC, and I'll get into this. FERC allowed for different approaches. There are internal market monitors. We are independent, as Sam showed us earlier. I do not report to the management in SPP, and we'll talk about that. But we are independent. There are external market monitors, such as Potomac Economics and David Patton, who looks at MISO. So if you're familiar with them, we do exactly the same stuff. The difference is Potomac Economics is a contractor effectively with MISO, and we are under the SPP umbrella, but independent. So why are we here? What are we doing? So the mission statement really highlights why we're a part of the process. The concerns are with the market power, that electric markets are not a natural. When you go you go to the restaurant and buy your lunch. There's not somebody there making sure that, geez, is this person taking you for too much money? But the problem is, in electric markets, there is market power, and market power is there are limitations in the transmission network that allow for resources to have concentration, and in that concentration, they can exercise market power, which would raise prices and harm consumers, and ultimately the ratepayers and the folks that you guys look out for. So FERC from the very beginning was concerned and said, geez, there is a potential for market power to be exercised, and so the importance of having market monitors to ensure that the outcomes are not being taken advantage of or gained. And unfortunately, if you followed the trade press over time, you've probably heard of Enron, you've probably heard of JP Morgan potentially, and other folks that have in fact gamed the markets. Enron out in California, JP Morgan out both in MISO and in California as well, to the tune of over $100 million in the JP Morgan case. And so substantial and bankrupting utilities in California in the Enron case. So there's a substantial need, and FERC has seen that, but has strengthened the role of the market monitor over time. And so as part of this presentation, you'll see the effects of those changes that FERC has implemented, and how we and what our roles are. But market power in gaming is essentially one of the top things that we're concerned with. We also look for design flaws and recommend changes. We are, so even though we are part of SPP, we can recommend that, geez, as Sam was saying, this is a member-driven process. The members want something. Well, if the members want to eat ice cream all day long, we might come along and say, you know what, maybe we're not going to vote ourselves some ice cream. There may be some other things that we need to do and have a balanced diet in terms of market rules. So we're there to help guide and advise that process in terms of improving market design.
How many people are in your group?
We'll get to that, Sam. We do have a slide that'll cover some of the backgrounds and the staff. And then finally on the mission statement, the third point talks about compliance with market rules. And that gets to, there's a tariff. We ensure that the tariff rules are being followed by market participants. So it does have kind of an auditing function. It's akin to that a little bit, or a compliance function. We do it from the market side. The RTO has staff that looks for compliance on a reliability side. And there's some NERC responsibilities on that, but ours is on the market side. So are you following the market rules? And unfortunately, I can sit here today and say that there is a strong need for a market monitor because participants are find creative ways to position themselves in the markets. And there are times when they definitely are attempting to cross the line, and that's why we're there. Okay, so independence. This is an important thing to talk about, is that as the independent market monitor, as I said earlier, we are independent of SPP. Nick Brown, our CEO, does not do my performance review. That is the oversight committee. We are independent of members and market participants. We are not looking out for their interests, per se. We are looking out for the overall market interests. And we are also independent of FERC. There is a misperception in some that the market monitors are just extensions of FERC, and that's not true. We do work very closely with FERC staff, particularly the Office of Enforcement, as well as their markets and rate side as well. But we are independent of those FERC members, SPP. We report to the Oversight Committee, so we are not a loose cannon, so to speak. We do have responsibilities. I do have a performance plan, and I do have goals and targets that we work out through the Oversight Committee, which is a subset of the Board of Directors. So Sam showed you the Board of Directors earlier and the various members. A subset of that group, there's actually 5 of them, and I report to them on essentially a bi-monthly basis, where we have discussions to talk about various topics that we're working on. So why have independence? I think it's important to say that, first of all, we're an objective advisor in the process. We have no decisional role. It's in some ways, I think there may be some analogies to some commission staff at times where it's like, well, we're advising, we're not actually decision makers in the process. We need to monitor behavior, and that behavior includes the RTO. If SPP is violating its own tariff, we can make a referral to the FERC Office of Enforcement. Say SPP staff is violating their tariff, and from that point, FERC will take it up. We investigate potential problems with behavior and the market design, and we're there to protect the market and ultimately the ratepayers and consumers as well. I think I was asked at one meeting, well, do you care about consumers and ratepayers? And the response is absolutely. We are looking at it to ensure that the market functions appropriately to the benefit of consumers and ratepayers. And this gets to Sam's question, what does our staff look like? We have a very diverse and highly technical staff, as you might imagine. We're a total of 16 staff. We're broken into 2 main groups at this point. There's a surveillance group, which is doing a lot of the day-to-day review of market outcomes. So we do have staff looking at every day, we have various screens and metrics that we run that are computer-based, primarily SAS and SQL are our tools, if you're familiar with that. And we use those tools to provide sort of screens of behavior and outcomes. And then from that, we get a list of outliers or anomalies. And what we do is we follow up with those outliers and anomalies to identify if there are any concerns. And again, a concern could be is this a design-based concern, or is this a participant behavior concern? And we see both. So our backgrounds are economics. We do have some engineers, computer science, as well as some others. Again, we have a wide range of advanced degrees, PhDs, MBAs, etc. So again, it's to be able to really dig in deep in the market in different ways, and we use all those skills to be successful. We also do have, while not on the slide, is we do contract with some legal counsel that is separate from the RTO's legal counsel, and they advise us and help us with some of the things that we're doing. All right, so I'm going to dive in a little bit in terms of, well, what are some of these terms in terms of what is surveillance? How do we do that? So market surveillance is we're reviewing inputs and outputs, really, if you want to think of it that way, of the market. So that can include market offers. So what is a participant? How much are they offering at what price? And then with that information, that the market has its process, as Sam was saying, it's trying to find the lowest overall cost, and then that creates a set of outcomes, and usually that's prices and schedules that we see come out of the market. And so we screen those results, the offers and the transactions, for any outliers and anomalies. And there are various tools that we have to do that. And we're also, as I said earlier, we're also watching what the operator is doing, and the operator in this case being SPP and their operations staff. In particular, are they taking manual actions that can influence market outcomes? And are they doing that appropriately? We do look at the tariff, and the tariff does require us to do certain reviews of certain behavior. And then finally, we assess the risks in the market, and so given that it's such you have prices every 5 minutes, right? So there are hundreds of pricing or thousands of pricing locations every 5 minutes in the day-ahead market. There's a real-time market, thousands of prices and transactions that are going on all the time, and so we have to sort of build our capabilities to look as much as possible, but also assess the risks in terms of where there is potential for market harm and where that's greatest. Monitoring for manipulation. This is, again, manipulation and gaming are terms of, they're sort of terms of art. I think when we talk to the oversight committee about what is gaming and what is manipulation, it's not necessarily, there can be a view that, well, if it's not in the tariff, it's okay. And I think FERC a long time ago realized that it couldn't have a rule, and these markets are very complex to start with. There's lots of different rules on how participants can participate. But the issue is, do we create a rule for every single thing that can or can't be done? And I think FERC realized that that's not possible. You can't have a can do this and can't do that checklist. And so what it came up with was rules around, well, you can't manipulate or game the market. And if you're doing that, it may not be a specific tariff rule that you violated, but you've attempted to change market outcomes in a way that is anti-competitive or is harming the market. And so we do monitor for that type of behavior. And the goal is obviously to ensure that the market is open and competitive. We have, in order to monitor the markets, we have processes that run at different time periods. We look daily, monthly, quarterly, annually. We are looking for, in addition to rules violations, we have complaints that we receive from market participants. So occasionally we'll receive a call or have a discussion with a market participant that says, we're seeing something. You might want to look into this. So it's a tip from a whistleblower. And if we do identify an issue, we will refer the behavior to the FERC Office of Enforcement. And the referral process is spelled out in our tariff, how it will work. I will note that the requirement for referrals is it doesn't require us to prove the manipulation has happened. The standard is sufficient credible information that a market violation has occurred. And so I think the way we've interpreted over time, along with the FERC staff, is it's more akin to a grand jury or a preliminary hearing where what is the bar of evidence that you need in a grand jury? And if you have sufficient credible evidence that something is occurring, we have the responsibility at that point and requirement to send that to FERC. And it's then the regulations are pretty clear that says anytime we find that, we are required to send it, or we would be in violation of the regulation. Yes.
So your team would handle the investigation and then give that over to FERC, or?
Yeah. So what we would do is, if we find it, and that's a great question. So if we find an anomaly in our screens, we would investigate that anomaly to ascertain the nature of it. Sometimes it could be a bug in the software. Sometimes it could be a participant trying to do something inappropriate. And we would assess it. And if we felt that it met that criteria of sufficient credible information that they had violated a market rule, we would then at that point hand it over to FERC staff. And at that point we are allowed to continue talking to FERC, but without we cannot continue investigating without FERC basically saying, we authorize you to continue investigating on our behalf. So,
I mean, Keith, another piece to it probably is you don't have the authority to fine or do any of those type of enforcements.
Correct, yeah, that's right.
You kind of layer on top of that.
That's right. We do not fine, we do not penalize. That authority all rests with FERC and the commission. But we do have the responsibility to identify and pass on and assist. So they may, and frequently do, we have regular communications with the FERC Office of Enforcement, and to the extent that we've passed along a referral, they can have dialogues with us to say, hey, can you explain this? We're understanding that. Can you look into that? And so it is there is a strong relationship that we have with FERC in terms of that process.
Do you also communicate with the market monitors and the other?
Yes. So this is a great question too. Do we communicate with other market monitors like David Patton and MISO? And the answer is absolutely yes. And there is a FERC order governing this that says that we can have those kind of communications, and we can share confidential information to the extent that it's related to something that we're reviewing. And so if there is a participant on the scene, for instance in Missouri, let's say, and they're manipulating actions across the scene, we would be in communications with the other market monitors. And we do meet regularly with the market monitors as a group as well to talk about best practices. There are things that we will see that we can inform others about, and there are times when they will see things and say, hey, have you seen this? And then we'll come back and we'll look to see if we see similar behavior. So it's very helpful to have those relationships. Though we don't always have the same opinions, but that's okay. All right. So another topic that we focus a lot on is market efficiency, and this gets to as we were saying earlier, what we're trying to do is develop rules to come out with the most efficient outcome to drive the most benefits for ratepayers and consumers overall. And so what we do is we analyze market performance to say, how is the market performing, and is it achieving the objectives that we set out? And unfortunately, as much as I like what we were saying earlier, that in practice, in theory, yes, there's lots of benefits. In practice, we might not be achieving all of them that we would like. And that's really what market efficiency is about. And as an objective advisor, we point those out. And so, and we do participate in the stakeholder process. So as Sam was saying, there's different committees. We do participate in some of the committees and the working groups. I also do present to the board when they're deciding about a particular topic. We'll have a discussion, and there'll be a discussion, and I will give the market monitor position, and that information will go and be a part of their decision-making process. And so if you've heard of something called a revision request in the SPP process and lingo, what that means is a revision request is something that is put forth to change a rule or a process. And so we can comment on those, we can actually design them and submit them ourselves. We can support them, pose them, and then at the FERC process as well, we do make comments at FERC. They can be very supportive of the process or not. And clearly we will outline our thoughts on the process. But I will say that, you know, thankfully, the market monitor input is definitely considered, but again, we're not always in complete agreement. Efficiency of the market is, again, we're assessing that with the focus on workable competition.
You know, primarily, I know you present or offer your advice at the Markets and Operations Policy Committee.
Correct, yes.
And your group is heavily involved in the Market Working Group, which is the working group that basically designs the rules.
Correct. That's right, that's right. So the committees that you'll see us most involved with are, one is the Market Working Group is really the committee where the market rules are designed and developed. So we, actually it's happening today, and we have staff down there providing guidance and advice as part of the process. The Market Operations Policy Committee, that's something that I usually attend as well, and provide guidance and thoughts on, and then ultimately up to the board. So we are involved in the processes. And we do track a lot of the other, while we're not as engaged with all the committees, we do track some other committees. For instance, we track what the HIT team is doing. We track what the Economic Studies Working Group is doing on the transmission side. So we're engaged and plugged in for sure. Transparency. One of the roles of a market monitor is to provide information to stakeholders. That can include RTO staff, FERC, commission staff, market participants, and so better help understand what's going on in the market, and ultimately describe and discuss the performance of the market. And so we do publish an annual report. It came out in April, or actually it was presented in April, but it came out early May. We do quarterly reports. Our last one came out yesterday. And we do have monthly reports that are presented to the Market Working Group. So we do have several reports where we're discussing market performance and market outcomes. And so for folks that are interested on that, I would encourage folks to take a look at those reports. And I'd be happy to send them along if you need some information on that. We also do reports on things called frequently constrained areas. Basically, it's an assessment of the transmission system and market power. It's a tariff-defined process, and we do reports on that. And we also do other ad hoc reports and white papers as well, again, to help present information to stakeholders. One of the things that you may be interested, or some of you may be interested, is that SPP does offer computer-based training, and they do have some topics here that are relative to market monitoring. And so it has an overview of market monitoring, talks about the process of mitigation. So one of the things that we talked about at the beginning is market power. And market power is the ability to influence and affect prices. And mitigation is a process to mitigate the use of market power. And essentially, we have the authority, or there's an automated process whereby participants' offers, market-based offers, can be changed to a cost-based offer instead of a market-based offer. And that's what the process of mitigation is. And so there's some CBTs on that. So if you're interested, here's a set of some CBTs that you might find useful and helpful on market monitoring. Also, we do like to sort of let folks know who we are, and so obviously I have my contact information here along with some of the other supervisors and managers. We also have a hotline. The hotline is typically, can be anything from a market participant has a question about could be anything really related to the market. We do have that staff 24/7 where we have both an email service and a phone service. So we take calls fairly regularly. Unfortunately, it seems that we win a lot of free nights and weekends and trips on the hotline. Fortunately, nobody has ever taken up an offer on that, but we do answer all calls. All right, okay, so I'm going to pause here just for a second, see if there's any questions about market monitoring in general and what we do. Yes?
As far as enforcement, you turn your results over first opens an active case, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Is there anything done in the interim for the potential violators to stop the behavior?
Okay, so at that point, FERC can assess. So one of the things that FERC is very clear on is they don't want market monitors to wait too long, because what they want to be able to do is, if they can subpoena information, they can do a cease and desist. FERC has those authorities, and so if we can pass along the issue to FERC in a timely manner, they can go through that process and they can ensure that documents are retained, that actions have stopped as well. I think in terms of getting actions to stop, typically I'd say in almost all cases, but maybe not all cases, if we're calling up a participant and saying, we don't have the authority to say stop doing this, but what we can do is say, here's actions that are being performed, here are actions that concern us very much. And then from that, we usually see, in most cases, the participants will stop the behavior at that point. However, there are times where the participants will continue, and that will make our process and referral process to FERC more timely to ensure that that will stop and that FERC will do what it needs to do.
And has there been any cases where entities have been fined and other actions taken, and then what happens to those fines? Are those passed back to customers? What's the process?
So there are cases where there have been fines, and in SPP and in other places. I think most of the ones in SPP have been, there have been some in the hundreds of thousands, but we've seen cases in New York ISO and Cal ISO where it's several $100 million. I think the largest one was the JP Morgan, and that came in around $450 million in both penalties and disgorgement. And so to answer the second part of your question is, well, what happens to that money? The penalty goes to the U.S. Treasury. The fine, or that's the penalty, the disgorgement is usually unjust profits, is typically returned back to the market and then redistributed amongst the participants. So and that can be a difficult process sometimes, because the FERC process can take, we've seen it take 6 or 7 years. So the participants that were in your market 7 years ago are gone, but some of them anyway. And so how do you redisperse that back can be a challenge. I'd say most frequently it goes back to load in most cases, but if they can target specifically a charge, then it will go back to a particular charge and the participants that are charged that.
Good question.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. All right. Okay, so the second part of my presentation here, I wanted to give you a taste of our annual report and some highlights for our annual report. Now, our annual report came out a few months ago, and the world is changing already, so I'll note some of the changes as we're going along in the presentation. But this is some of the highlights that we had in our report and key takeaways. So overall, the markets are competitive and efficient, and the reasons we conclude that are what we're seeing here is we're seeing low energy prices, about $23 a megawatt hour for all of 2017. We had the low, the ERCOT Market Monitor came out with a comparison chart, and SPP's prices were by far the lowest relative to everybody else. And that's all in, including capacity markets that they have in MISO and other regions. SPP overall had the lowest. Now, is that always is lower better? There's some concern on that too, and we'll talk about that as part of this presentation. But we did have the lowest prices, around $23 for the year. The frequency of mitigation. So I talked earlier about there are times where market power concerns exist, and market offers can be replaced with cost-based offers, and that's known as mitigation. And so the frequency of mitigation is low. So we're not doing that fairly frequently. By low, I'm talking about something in the order of 0.2% of the time in most cases. So it's fairly low overall. Although when you talk to market participants, they'll present it as if it's rampant. I'm mitigated 90% of the time. When you look at what's actually happening, mitigation is incredibly infrequent. And so it's kind of the market participant boogeyman. And so if you ever end up talking to a participant, I'm sure that somebody will say we're mitigated all the time, and it's terrible, when that is just not the case. Low levels of what are known as make-whole payments. Make-whole payments are essentially side payments to ensure that incentives are aligned. So there are times when resources may be asked to do something by the market, and the market revenues are insufficient to cover their costs. That's what a make-whole payment does. It says, I asked you to do something, it doesn't cover your costs, we'll make a side payment to you. And so the concept is that make-whole payments are low. And for the year, they were about $68 million. And that is fairly low overall. And when you compare us to other regions, it's among the lowest that you'll find anywhere else, lower than MISO, PJM, and some of the other markets. So they are low. So again, that's a sign of an efficient market outcome. We talk about declining excess capacity. Really, what Sam said earlier was, well, part of the great benefit of our market is that when we commit resources, you don't want to have too many resources. You want it just right because it's the most economic and reliable at the same time. And one of the things that we had seen as a concern was the amount of resources that were available and online was a bit high relative to what the peak loads were. And by high, I have a slide that'll show this, it was about 30% above what the peak is, and we felt that you didn't need 30% above peak to meet the requirements. And in fact, we've seen that come down. And then finally, an alleviation of a congestion bottleneck. This has been a significant change in the market. As Sam was saying, we're trying to take wind from the western parts of the system and move them to the eastern parts of the system. But in that central Oklahoma area, it was just getting crammed and getting trapped. And so that was creating price separation between the western parts of the footprint and the eastern parts of the footprint, like Kansas City, et cetera, were higher relative to these other places. And that had to do with a bottleneck that was alleviated, which is a significant market event in 2017. Okay. Yeah, so let's look at what we're looking at here are natural gas prices in the purple, and then we have SPP prices in the green, and the blue is the day-ahead market. So the green is the real-time market that's been around for several years, and then we have the day-ahead market in the blue. It's been around for a few years. So these are the average prices for the year, and what you'll see is that for the most part, electric prices follow the gas prices. And so as gas prices were high back in the 2007, 2008, electric prices were higher. As gas prices came down, electric prices came down. And that correlation has been pretty good has held for some time. And in most markets, that is also true as well. And what you'll see here is the gas prices were about $7 in 2018, and it was about $2 and I believe 65 cents in 2017. So it's come down quite a bit. And then the electric prices have followed that at about $23 in 2017, which it's been over the last couple of years.
And I should have said this earlier, we didn't start our integrated market until March of
2014. And that's what you'll
Picked
see
up
here.
there in
Yeah.
the blue line.
Yeah.
the day ahead.
Yeah, that day ahead here is in the blue line, and so the real time has existed with the energy and balance service, and the day ahead came here in 2014. So we talked about the alleviation of the congestion. Here is a heat map. I know Sam in his presentation has some of these, but this one is looking at the 2017 before the transformer went in. This is the transmission modification, and then after it went in. So it disappeared, or it alleviated. It's still there to some extent, but it's significantly reduced. It went down from an average of about $100. The congestion effect was about $100, and it went down to more like 15. So it's a significant reduction, and the frequency of the constraint, I think it went down from something like 80% of the time in the day-ahead market down to more like 10% of the time. So substantial reduction in congestion as a result of it. And you'll see here the reds mean higher, the blue means lower, and it's basically, for the most part, transferring wind from these areas here in western Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, and pushing it further east. And you'll see that's alleviated. So a substantial, so this is a plug, if you will, for the integrated transmission planning process that's looking for what are the benefits to the region as a whole by modifications to the system. And in this case, while I don't know off the top of my head what the cost was to the phase shifting transformer, but the impacts to the market have been hundreds of millions of dollars of change. So the reality is it's paid for itself already as well. So it's a substantial improvement to the transmission. Yes?
How does the phase shifting transformer work?
That is effectively how it moves the power across the system. It changes how power flows over different lines. And so it allows to move it not just over a particular path, but it can help move that power over different paths. All right, so what are the market drivers? And we've talked a little bit about them already. So gas prices are a market driver. Gas prices are on the margin about, or price, so when resources set prices, they're usually gas resources, that's about 50% of the time. And so if you have lower gas prices, you tend to have lower power prices as well. There is a large reserve margin in SPP. What is a reserve margin? A reserve margin is looking at how much generation capacity do you have on the system relative to your peak load. It's about 30%, which is the highest RTO that exists. The target is 12%. We're at 30%. So this is an interesting debate that you'll hear from time to time, which is, well, the larger your reserve margin, the more reliability you have. But the question is at what cost, right? And that's, your ratepayers are paying for this reserve margin at 30% when the target is 12. And we continue to see more resources being added. And last year, we saw 2,200 megawatts of additions. We saw 130 megawatts of reductions. And while most of the additions were wind, and so you have to discount that for about 1,500 megawatts were wind, 700 megawatts were gas. So what we have is a system with a lot of capacity available on it. And unfortunately, one of the recommendations we have is how SPP counts capacity discounts the true, what we see in market monitoring is the true picture of capacity on the system. And so what happens is we believe we actually have more capacity than what SPP is saying. So SPP will say it's 30%. We actually think it's more than that. It depends on how you count it. And we have a recommendation saying, hey, maybe you can show us a different way to count resources, and you'll show that's even higher. Now, part of the debate that's going on, and one that's probably important for the commission here, is a lot of the new build is merchant and wind. Right? And the utilities at many SPP stakeholder meetings will say, well, we don't need more wind. So somebody needs to stop telling them to build more wind. my personal take is that's a violation of 888 if you're telling people you can't build something or discouraging particular classes of resources from building. I think FERC made it clear that open access allows anybody to connect and interconnect to the grid. And so we've seen a lot of wind interconnection. I have a slide in a second that'll show us, well, I think the next slide will show us how much wind is connected to the system. And it's been exponential growth over the last several years, and that's changing the dynamics of the market. What we also have is some costs. So there's been a lot of coal resources that were built 20, 30, 40 years ago, and now they're competing with wind resources that nobody planned to compete with. And so they're still running. And unfortunately, that creates interesting market dynamics. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. So high levels of wind generation is a market driver. I think the way to think about SPP is, when we talk about our 2017 report, is it's a wind story. You have to, in order to understand what's happening in SPP, you have to really understand wind. And what that's doing to the dynamics of the market. And then finally, there's flat load growth overall. If anything, it was down a little bit on average. Okay, so the next slide, we're looking at the increase in wind capacity in the green bars and wind generation in the blue line. And so what you'll see here is, this is 2017, and there was, maybe less than a couple thousand megawatts of capacity. And we have approximately 18 gigawatts of wind capacity on the system, nameplate today. Now again, we recognize that, that's not all blowing on a hot day, but what we've seen is we've seen almost 16 gigawatts of wind blowing on a windy day. So that's, and it's great that it was about a 64% penetration of wind on the system that SPP was able to manage, but that's changing the dynamics of the market. And I think one of the things we're recognizing is that you need to recognize that it's there, and it will show up. And so we've seen, just from 2015 to 2017, it was an 80% increase in wind generation. Okay, so this is, no other RTO has this problem. Now, yes, you might say ERCOT has more wind on their system, but in terms of penetration, they don't have the same penetration. CalISO is a solar system, primarily. It might have 12 gigawatts of solar, but we've got 18 gigawatts of wind. And so that is, the wind doesn't, on average, we can predict it fairly well, but it does deviate. And when you have the deviations, that can affect the market prices.
And keep in mind, remember the pie chart I showed you early on that showed what resources were in our GIQ? And I think I pointed out it was like 40-something gigs of wind. Now we're looking at 17.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's a lot, exactly. It's big now, and the queue will just, it's not going to be 100% built, but even if it's 10%, it's still very large. And the fact that you've got solar in the queue as well, we continue to just add it. Now, the question, in some states like California, they have a mandate, right, that says 50% wind by 2030, right? And so that's why they're building solar in California. They're not building wind in SPP because of state mandates. They're building it there because it's windy in SPP. If you've ever seen a map of the wind potential, SPP is the heart of all the wind potential in the whole country. So if you're a Google or Facebook, and we see these guys coming in saying, I have a corporate mandate to have 100% renewables, I'm going to build my wind where it's windy, and that happens to be in western Oklahoma and western Kansas. And sure enough, the problem is, then we get the question of deliverability, right? Is that okay? Google and Facebook just contracted to build wind in western Kansas, where's the power going to go? And that's something that SPP has to manage, and as the market monitor, we're looking at the price outcomes. What's that doing to the prices and the markets? This is a similar chart to something that Sam already talked about, which is wind generation on the system. It's 23%. That's up from about 18% in 2016, and it continues to climb. Whereas coal, we saw here at around, going back several years, was around 65 to 70%. Now it's at 46%. So wind is displacing coal. And gas is also displacing coal too. I think the combination of the two is the low gas prices and the increase in wind are displacing the coal, not just wind. All right. So what are the issues? So as a market monitor, we have we identify concerns and issues, and we advise folks on how to deal with them. So the first one is self-commitment. This is something that, from an efficiency and economist, it sort of rubs you the wrong way, which is resources that have some costs, have coal contracts that are sort of, I think, not favorable, let's say, and resources that will self-commit in the market, which basically says, Sam said, hey, the savings in our market comes when we commit, we optimize and the lowest cost, but then somebody comes in and says, I don't care what the lowest cost is, my coal plant is running. And we see a lot of that in our system, is about, I don't have the slide with me here, but I believe it is about, is it 40%?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 40%. 40% of the resources self-commit, and most of those are coal resources, which means they're not being economically evaluated, which means that's eating into your benefits of what the RTO market can do, and that you're decreasing the value that we're providing, and it's not an efficient outcome. And a lot of that is occurring. There's a lot of discussion about, well, I have a coal resource, the commission approved it, it's designed to go for 60 years, it's 40 years in, I'm gonna run it for 20 years, I don't care what the market says. Unfortunately, from an efficiency standpoint, there's wind resources that are there cheaper. You can contract with the wind, you can buy in the spot market, and you can reduce your costs to your customers and ratepayers.
Y'all are seeing that happen today with Empire District Electric. They announced, I guess, was it last year or earlier this year, that they're retiring some of their coal units and replacing it with wind contracts, which they wouldn't be able to do if the transmission system didn't exist.
Exactly, and that's a great benefit. Now, I will note that while we say the self-commitment is an issue, it has been improving. All right, so directionally, it's getting better. And actually, I will note that over the spring period in May, we saw the lowest levels of self-commitment since the very beginning of the market. I think it was the second month of the market. So, question here.
What causes that?
What causes the self-commitment?
No. What causes them to choose not to self-commit now?
I think part of it is, our hope is that we have been shining some light on what's going on in the markets in terms of, and we've been discussing this with market participants. I think part of it comes with understanding the market, understanding their impacts on the market. That their choice to self-commit actually has a negative impact for them in the long run, because now they're lowering market prices for their whole fleet, right? And so that's not a positive outcome. So again, negative or low prices or negative prices, which we're going to talk about in a second, are not always a good thing. Wind generation underscheduled in the day-ahead market. Approximately 82% of the wind, so you have what wind shows up in real time, 82% of that is in the day-ahead market. Now, I just said we had almost 16 gigs of wind generation at one time. Now, what happens when only 82% of 16 gigs is in the day-ahead market? That's several thousand megawatts that is not in the day-ahead market. So what happens is the day-ahead market will solve to a higher level. And then when you come into real time, you have 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts just materialize that you didn't plan for. What happens to the market prices? They go low, and in fact, they'll go negative. And so this is an issue. You're planning in the day-ahead market for one solution, you're coming into real-time market with a different solution, and market prices are being crushed. And that is not an efficient outcome. frequency of negative prices doubled. We had 7% of all intervals in our real-time market were negative. So what happens when you have a negative price? It means if you're generating incrementally, so if the real-time market has to do with anything that's different from the day ahead. If you're increasing output in real time, you're having to pay to generate. So again, is a negative price bad? Well, it's a signal, right? It is a consequence, and it's a consequence of some of the things we're talking about, like self-commit and under-scheduling and wind. Real-time price, yes, question.
Could you speak just briefly on the amount of variation that generators are allowed from what they've dispatched, what they've fit into the day ahead?
You mean variation that they can do? There are, effectively, they can generate, the reality is they can end up generating more. To the extent that they're not creating a reliability concern, they can generate more. Now, there is a charge for deviation, but there is no set amount that they're allowed to do. They could legitimately have a 100 megawatt unit and say, well, I'm going to just generate 100 megawatts even though I don't have a schedule.
What is that range that they're allowed in the SPP though before they hit that charge?
I think it's about 5%, or I think it's 5%. Yeah. Okay. Real-time price volatility. So this is a concern that, and gets to the concern that I think some of the wind generators will say in their under-scheduling in the day ahead is that real-time prices can be volatile, and if they ever ended up in a situation where they were short, they might have to buy back, and they buy back at a volatile price. So real-time price volatility doubled, or nearly doubled. And part of the reason for that is ramping limitations. And what's ramping? Well, as we said, our real-time market sets prices every 5 minutes. And as you move generation up and down from one 5-minute interval to the next, you might actually run out of enough rampable resources. You might have enough generation overall, but in 5 minutes, they just can't move fast enough. And what ends up happening is you'll get a price spike. And typically, you might even have a shortage of reserves. So you might not, we don't have enough regulation now because we're trying to meet our ramping requirement. And when that happens, is that when you're short of a reserve, there's a penalty price associated with that, and that gets baked into the market price. And so during those periods, that can end up with a lot of price variability. And one of the concerns that we have is that the SPP market is not very good at looking ahead. I know MISO is a little bit better at this than we are, and some of the other markets as well. But SPP's market solves each individual interval, but it's not looking to see, well, what about the next interval? And unfortunately, what can happen is you end up with shortages of ramp, and you have price spikes that'll go along with that. We saw congestion increase overall. Again, a lot of this is wind. Typically, when we think of congestion, you think of a city, and you're trying to get power into the city. Unfortunately, what we have is we have a lot of wind, and you're trying to get a lot of wind out, and you get stuck. So it doesn't even make it to the city. So that congestion has increased quite significantly. I believe it was about 80% or so from 2016 to 2017. And as I said earlier, we don't have many resources retiring. So just a couple of clarifying slides before we wrap up here. This highlights the wind under scheduling in the day ahead issue that I mentioned. This is how much additional wind you have in real time. So that's 1,200 megawatts. You do have some increase in imports. Here's your self-committed generation. And then you have some additional commitments that occur. For instance, the operators may do that. So out of all of that, clearly wind is the highest. So why do we have more generation in real time than day ahead? Because of the wind. Under schedule. There are things in the market called virtual bids and offers. And so this allows financial participants to come into our market to arbitrage away differences. Unfortunately, their arbitrage falls a little short. And ultimately, we have significant a significant amount of capacity that is in real time that is not in the day ahead. And so that results in lower real-time prices and some of the negative prices we're seeing. All right? Negative prices. So 2017 here in the purple, 2016 and 2015, this is an hourly view of negative prices. This is in the real-time market. And what you'll see here is that in the early morning, late evening hours, more than 15% of the prices are negative. Or 15% of the time, sorry. And so it doubled, and it actually doubled throughout the day. Even in these hours here, we see a higher frequency of negative prices. And again, the items we're talking about, the self-committing of generation that's not economic, the under-scheduling of wind in the day ahead, all factoring into the frequency. Yes?
What does 2018 look like so far?
Okay, excellent question. So the beginning of the year was similar. The last couple months is different, and it's actually declined. And there's a couple reasons for the decline. First off is the loads were higher in the spring months. So we had some hot temperatures in this footprint in May. 14% higher load in May. And it was actually cold in March and April, which actually raised the loads as well. So we had higher loads, so we had fewer negative prices, and there was some additional transmission build out. There was a new 345 kV line, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was added, so it helped alleviate some of those transmission bottlenecks. And so those factors combined to help reduce the instance, at least over the last couple months. Okay, and then congestion. One of the things that some market participants have been concerned about is inability to hedge congestion. So our market does include a hedging product for congestion, and there are actually a couple of products. One is known as an auction revenue right, or an ARR, and another one is called a transmission congestion right, or TCR. And it's a hedging tool to hedge congestion that occurs in the spot markets, particularly the day-ahead market.
When I was talking about the RSC, I said one of the areas of their responsibility was on the allocation of FTRs, which is the old term for what Keith just described.
Yes.
Keith, can you talk just a little bit about congestion really meaning different prices?
Yes. Okay, great point, great point. So what is congestion? Congestion really is as we were saying earlier, you've got the wind in the western part of the footprint, it's trying to go to Kansas City, right? But the transmission system basically hits its limit, and you can't move enough power. And what happens in the market is it will create a price separation. So the place where all the generation is trapped, the prices go lower, and where the generation is needed but can't get into, the prices will be higher. And that difference between those two prices is called congestion. And it's congestion pricing. And there are mechanisms, as I said, the ARRs and the TCRs. These mechanisms are designed to hedge that price difference and help the loads basically remain neutral towards that congestion. Unfortunately, what we found was, at least in 2017, and it's gotten better in 2018, but in 2017, the blue represents the congestion exposure in terms of total dollars. Actually, we don't have the utilities, but these are all utilities here, load-serving entities, masked. But the blue means you've got a lot of congestion exposure, meaning that you can't get low-cost generation into your system. And there's a handful of them, and most of them are on the eastern part of the SPP system, such as KCPL, AEP, others, that are on the eastern part. Then you have others, for instance, there are some down here where you see the blue is positive, which meaning they're actually getting congestion payments from the day-ahead market. And so what participants will do using these tools, hedging tools, is they will acquire positions, and those are the green, to hedge the congestion. Unfortunately, a handful of participants, and the bottom 3 or 4 here, it's about $30 million on average that they were unable to hedge. And so there have been some discussions in SPP over the last year talking about this problem, saying, hey, I want to hedge, but I can't. And so that's something that the RTO is looking in, we're looking into. Although we did, in our most recent quarterly report, which came out yesterday, we reanalyzed this for 2018, and we found that it's better. So participants have been doing a better job of hedging their exposure, which is great, because given this chart, it looked pretty bad. It's much better. Okay, fine, and I'll wrap up here with recommendations. Well, what are recommendations? The first one is to enhance market efficiency. And this gets to the reducing the frequency of self-committing. And part of that can be accomplished potentially through a multi-day unit commitment process. I won't go into too many details, but that is one process that could help that. Address the underscheduling of wind that we saw in the chart. Increase flexibility on the system. One of them is look ahead. As I said, the system doesn't look ahead very well. And MISO has a ramping product that looks ahead. That's something where SPP can learn from MISO experiences on the ramping product. And so that is something that we can look to develop. Decommit logic. Essentially, once SPP commits you, whether it makes sense, once you've been committed, you're committed. Unfortunately, what can happen is the market conditions can change drastically, but it won't decommit you. And so one of the things that we can do is say, hey, we made a commitment, let's pull that back if conditions change. And then energy storage. FERC leapfrogged us on this one when we made the recommendation. They came out with their order just before we formally put this in our report. But we do support that. We do think that there is a lot of potential for energy storage to help address some of the concerns that we're seeing, particularly if you get the scale. And continue to align the planning process they have at the RTO with their operational realities. And this gets to the undercounting of capacity that we see, is that all the wind shows up in real time, but not all the wind is planned for in the planning processes, and that's unfortunate. And then we have some outstanding recommendations, in particular one that is going to the board. It was at the board. Unfortunately, KCPL was a vocal, they were not a supporter, they were vocal against it, which is to make non-dispatchable renewable resources dispatchable. And so there are about 6,000 megawatts of resources on our system. So 6,000 out of about 80,000. That when you end up with negative prices, there are 6,000 resources that you can't dispatch down, so you dispatch somebody else. And most of those are wind resources. About 4,500 megawatts are wind resources that are a little bit older, and so they've been grandfathered. And what we've recommended is to require those resources to be dispatchable. Unfortunately, there's a lot of pushback in the stakeholder process, but the RTO did a study. They looked at 1 month and found that there were several $million, I think it was several $1 million of benefits in 1 month. If you take that to the year, there's probably tens of millions of dollars in benefits to have resources be dispatchable. But participants are not willing to take that leap. And unfortunately, that's harming everyone in the market. So we recommend the change. Question in the back. All set? Okay. All right.
And the board's gonna, is the board gonna address that at their next meeting?
There may be there's some additional discussions occurring at the MWG today.
Okay.
It's likely to be discussed again at the end of the MOPSI in a couple weeks, and likely to go to the board again as well. So that's one where we see substantial benefits for changing. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
The only time I ever talk to Keith is when we come to these kind of things. I don't think I've ever been up in y'all's whole sequestered area. Okay, so we've got to talk a little bit about grid congestion. Keith did a good job, so I'm not going to spend much time with it at all. So we talked a little bit. You driving or am I driving?
Your job.
So we talked a little bit about what congestion is, and it's basically a bottleneck on our transmission system where cheaper resources can't be delivered to load as we would like. And these are the reasons for congestion. A lot of times it's due to a lack of transmission, and that happens where you've got high load growth. As Keith said, load in our system has been flat or declining. There are exceptions to that. We saw a lot of load growth up in North Dakota associated with the Bakken oil play, and we've seen high load growth in western or eastern New Mexico, West Texas, due to oil play there as well. We haven't seen yet, I don't think, some of the things that are popping up in other areas. I'm just going to say Bitcoin miners, those kind of operations, which they're basically chasing cheap transmission rates. We may wind up having to deal with those issues, but they'll pop in, consume a lot of electricity for a short period of time, and then go chase cheaper rates somewhere else. So you don't really want to build a transmission to serve somebody that's not going to be there, right? So anyway, it's not an issue yet, but it could be. Let's see. Again, the bottom line with congestion is it results in an inability to use the least cost electricity to meet the demand that you have on the system. This is another picture, similar to what Keith showed. So you see where the high prices are in this area, all right? And then the low prices are just west of the congestion point, the bottleneck. And this is just another picture of that. It's the west to east flow across northwestern Oklahoma. And west of that constraint, congestion constraint, you've got a price of negative $9.66 a megawatt hour. East of the constraint, it's $86.88 a megawatt hour. Okay. All right, so now we're going to move into planning. Just talk about some basic concepts on how we do planning in SPP. We take into consideration reliability, economics, and public policies. And when you say public policies, you probably wonder, what is he talking about? So back in probably, how long's it been now? Probably back about 6 years ago, 7 years ago maybe. A lot of the states in our region were adopting renewable portfolio standards, which basically meant that, say, a state would have a requirement that they'd have to have 20% wind in their utilities electricity portfolios. We saw that in a lot of our states. That would be a public policy that we have to plan for. Reliability, though, is always the first thing that we focus on. So our planners typically focus on a number of different things when they're trying to come up with their transmission portfolios. What part of the grid needs to be strengthened in order to keep the lights on? Where do we think, where's the current generation located, and where do we think generation is going to be located? Where is the load? Where is it located? And where on the grid do we see frequently see congestion? We're doing a lot more work, and it's really improving quite a bit. Our operations folks are providing lots of input into the planning folks at this point. So we're trying to match what happens in real time with what we plan for, okay? Again, what laws would mandate more renewable energy? I really think that's probably a low thing that we look at anymore, because we've got so much wind on the system that we've blown by all those RPS standards years ago. What about the impact that coal and gas prices will have? And then regional temperatures, how does that affect any sort of transmission? So the larger we get, the more important that last bullet becomes. And this is a chart just showing the investment in transmission that has been directed by SPP. As you can see, it's starting to decrease a little bit. I think Justin said that 2021 is when we'll see the last of those balanced portfolio projects coming into.
Well, in 2022 or 21 will be the last time they will rebalance it. The payments going back
Those
and forth.
payments, yeah.
But they'll come off whenever the depreciation schedules, when they come together, whenever that happens.
So what we've really been seeing though is a drastic reduction in transmission. A lot of these projects are related to our first ITP-10, a lot of it's some of the balanced portfolio projects, but again, it's decreasing. Regulators like this chart because it tells them that their ratepayers are going to be paying less at some point in the future. Our planning folks hate this chart because they think that their job is to plan and direct additional transmission to be built. So. Again, $6.9 billion in completed projects, $6.9 billion. So how do we make our transmission decisions? One of our working groups, or a couple of our working groups are focused on the planning process. And we work with our members to try to create a portfolio of transmission projects that will provide significant net benefits across the region. So it's what we call an integrated transmission planning process. We also look at generation interconnection studies. That's another way that transmission gets built. We look at transmission service requests on an aggregate basis. And then there are specific high priority type transmission studies that we do. I mean, all of those affect how transmission gets built. Keith's already talked about this. This shows the ITP-10 for 2012, 2015, 2017, and 2019. And the story there is loads decreasing, basically. Also, the ITP-10 portfolio costs have decreased significantly. Right now, or last year, I guess we were looking at a $57 million project. That's nothing for our region. But again, we've been successful in building out. Now I'm going to hit some of the planning maps that we utilize. So this is our footprint. Kind of ish. I still don't like the way Arkansas is pictured, but that's it in context of the country, see where we're located. These are the transmission zones. We talked about those earlier. And these are projects that have been constructed or that have notices to construct issued for the projects from 2005 to last year through last year. The story here, I think, really is the red lines. 345 kV build out that's occurred since 2005, particularly since the advent of the highway-byway cost allocation methodology. Once the states were able to agree on how they would allocate the cost of those transmission facilities, getting it built was not a problem because we knew who was going to pay. Okay? But again, this is, remember I told you early on that our build out basically focused on improving the flows north to south, south to north, and west to east. And that's what that picture should tell you. And this is some planned expansion of the grid that we're anticipate. And these are all 230 kV or greater lines or upgrades. And again, it's everything we do is about wind. I mean, it just is. That's the itch we have to scratch at the end of the day. Here's where generation is distributed across the region. And you can see the mix of that generation. Wind are the green bubbles. Gas are the purple bubbles. They're usually in fairly close proximity to each other because they need gas to support the flow when wind doesn't show up. And we talked about renewables. We've got 17 gigs installed of wind capacity today in SPP. We've also got unbuilt wind that have signed interconnection agreements. We talked a little bit about that, and that's approximately 10 gigs. And wind in all stages of study and development is approximately 37 gigawatts. We anticipate more than 20 gigs will be installed by 2020. I think we're going to blow by all of these numbers. I don't even know why we put these up there because we're going to just blow right through them. But they've also forecast 25 to 31 gigs to be installed by 2025. So our maximum wind output was approximately 16 gigs on December of last year. Maximum penetration in March 11th was 58%. Our average for 2017 was around 25% penetration. Maximum wind swing was greater than 10 gigawatts. And then maximum 1 hour ramp is 3,700 megawatts. Keith did mention, I know that some of the guys in market design are talking about, they've been talking about for a year trying to develop some new ramping products. They'll just have to work its way through the stakeholder process.
Talk about what you mean by a ramp product.
Yeah, it's a product that allows generation to ramp, move up or down as needed.
Yeah, ramping product is really something that secures enough rampable capability to meet the needs as the system moves up and down. So if you have, I think on the last chart he showed, we had the wind decline, or wind can go up and down by 3,700 megawatts. A ramping product would ensure that you'd have 3,700 megawatts of capability to go up and down to meet that movement.
Thanks. So this is another chart just showing the wind capacity that's been installed by year and what we're anticipating. And they've looked, our members have looked at the possibility of trying to move the wind outside our footprint. And nobody wants to pay to do that. Nobody wants to pay to build the transmission to do that. And folks on the outside of our region don't want to pay to build a transmission to get it delivered to them either. So it's an opportunity we're just going to have to address within SPP. We are starting to see some utility grade solar in SPP. We've got around 200 megawatts installed today, but we've got about 7.5 gigs under study. And that's where solar's located. No surprise there, right? Eastern New Mexico. Challenges with development of wind within the region. Wind's intermittent, so it's not available all the time. Having a fairly large footprint alleviates that somewhat. I mean, the idea being wind's blowing somewhere at all times, right? But it's got to be supplemented with other generation resources. Typically that's gas. Storage will help that to the extent that storage prices come down. Wind's in remote areas. It's expensive to build transmission to try to harvest that wind. And one of the things we've seen increase significantly, you guys have probably seen the same thing, is siting issues are increasing quite a bit. When somebody wants to build new transmission in an area, we get lots of local protests at state levels over that. And I've seen that increase over the last 5-6 years. So back when the Clean Power Plan was being discussed by EPA, one of the things that we tried to point out to the environmental regulators was when you retire a coal unit, which is fine, we're gonna have to build new transmission in order to harvest or to connect to the new generating resources typically. And that takes anywhere from 3 to 10 years, once you go through the siting and all the rest of it, to actually build and place a new line in service. So it's not gonna happen like that. Seams agreements, again, that's what I was alluding to when I said we had a group last year that was looking at probably trying to export wind. There are seams issues related to that. And then renewable energy standards, that's another thing. We've long passed all of those standards. These are the renewable portfolio standards by state. The only state that didn't have a standard was Arkansas. Okay. So they range anywhere from 10 to 20% by date certain. Here's the wind that we have in the generation interconnection queue right now. That's where those resources are located, the potential resources are located. And then I wanted to provide you all with an interregional planning update. So Adam had asked me to describe what's in the blank space here in Missouri. That's AECI, very large electric co-op here in the state of Missouri. We do coordinated system planning with AECI. We did a plan back earlier this year, and we also do joint planning with MISO, and that's called our Coordinated System Plan. And let's go to AECI first. We initiated a new study with them this year, and the scope was endorsed by the stakeholders. That's the IPSAC, if you will. I don't remember what IPSAC stands for.
Interregional Planning Stakeholder Advisory Committee. And I'm so sad that I know that.
It is sad, but I knew you would know it. So it was endorsed in April, and that we just described the models that we'll use to run those scenarios. And then hopefully we'll see if there are any solutions that will benefit both AECI and the SPP members at the end of the study process. What they found out, I'm seeing all this for the first time, was that there were no joint needs as a result of the study. And they released the results of the study to an IPSAC meeting last month, and then we'll issue a final report once the stakeholders have taken a look at it. And I don't know what the timing is for that, but we're going to look now at trying to come up with improvements to our study process for the next SPP AECI study, which is scheduled for a couple of years from now. There were two projects that came out of the 2016 joint study with AECI. One is the Morgan Transformer Project, and the other is the Brookline Reactor Project. Brookline is it's not part of my focus at this point because it's being picked up in the integrated transmission planning process, the near-term process. And that project we anticipate will be approved by the board in July at their meeting. The Morgan Transformer Project, however, my boss and our director of interregional processes is going to be meeting with FERC staff tomorrow in DC, and we've got meetings scheduled with 3 of the 5 commissioners and their staff, as well as the FERC staff that will be processing the filing. And
Hey, Sam?
Yeah.
You talk about where those projects are located, because I don't think my colleagues may know that.
Boom. Here's Morgan. So it's from Brookline to Morgan, whatever those are. I don't know where this is on the state. It's somewhere over
Brookline's right outside of Springfield.
Springfield.
Missouri, not Missouri.
Missouri?
Yeah, no, it's Missouri.
Missouri?
I have no control over him.
I know you don't. I'm not looking to you for help. I can deal with that.
She used to. She was my boss for like 12 years.
The problem that we've had with AEC, with this Morgan Transformer project at FERC, is that we're asking for the cost that we're going to pick up, that our members are going to pick up, be spread across regionally. So it'd be allocated on a low ratio share basis. What makes it a little unique, though, is that the project is completely within AECI's service territory. So we'll pick up 89% of the cost if FERC approves it, and AECI will pick up the rest.
I think, Sam, the important part on that, right, is that that's, once again, helping reliability and the flow of from north to south for us.
Yeah, what we try, this will be our, Adam, keep me honest. This will be our second attempt at FERC to get this project approved. We tried to get a policy approved by FERC for cost allocation of projects that are along the same and outside the Order 1000 process, which I haven't talked about. But FERC did not approve those policies and instead told us to come back on a case-by-case basis with specific projects. We did that, and we're told no, and so we're trying it again. We really want to see this project get built, frankly. FERC wants to see it get built too, and I think the key is going to be whether or not anybody protests the filing at FERC. The first time we made it, the filing, we had 3 protests. And FERC's a funny animal. If nobody protests the filing at FERC, the FERC staff can just issue an order. If there's a protest, though, that changes dynamics. So, stay tuned. Our joint planning process was MISO. So SPP and MISO held their IPSAC meeting in February 27th, and based on feedback from the IPSAC, that committee, SPP and MISO, have opted not to do a coordinated system plan this year. Instead, we're going to focus on trying to improve the planning process. So, stay tuned. Adam follows all of this stuff.
Yeah, next meeting of that one is Friday, so.
So we had asked for feedback from stakeholders on how to enhance or improve the process. We basically asked these questions. Which of the process improvements do you support? Are there additional improvements you'd like to see that weren't discussed? Any ideas on a study structure that would support the enhancements, and other thoughts or questions? And these are some of the potential changes. Expand the interregional benefit metrics, which would help. What we're trying to do is avoid what they call a triple hurdle. So we do a joint study with MISO, and we come up with some projects that we recommend be built. That's hurdle number 1. Okay. Hurdle number 2 is when we take that group of projects to our stakeholders and ask them to approve it. And hurdle number 3 is when MISO takes those same set of projects to their stakeholders and asks them to approve it. And we have not been able to overcome the triple hurdle, if you will. So my shorthand version, and Adam, you keep me honest, is that we really are trying to find ways to avoid that. So. Now I'm going to move to the HIT. You've heard me mention it a couple of times. And if you're curious about what direction SPP is going to be going in the future in terms of planning and cost allocation and market design, you need to follow this group. This group was started up in April, I believe. It's the
Holistic Integrated Task Team.
There you go. And I joke that our officers should never be allowed to name things because they come up with stupid stuff like this.
anyway, there was a precursor to the HIT, and that's one that I mentioned earlier this morning, is the SPPT, the Synergistic Planning something project team. Again, officers should not be allowed to name things, okay? And they focused on basically, they started in January 2009 and they finished up by April of that year, and they were trying to figure out new cost allocation methodologies or approaches, as well as a new planning process. And they came up with a recommendation at the RSC, see if they could work out the details between around something called the highway-byway cost allocation methodology. And they also asked SPP and our members to see if we could come up with a more integrated planning process. And we did both of those, but again, that was back in 2009. And they focused then was on planning and cost allocation principles. So what they did was they come up with high-level recommendations, and then they send it to the stakeholder groups to deal with the details, okay? It was a closed group. There were 2 state regulators on the group, 2 members of SPP, so an IOU and a co-op, as I recall. There was only about 7 or 8 members on this group. Unlike SPP's meetings are largely always open. This group, when it met behind closed doors, and you could call in, but you couldn't say anything. So you could hear what the discussion was about, but you couldn't participate in the discussion. I'm not going to go through all this. This is just a high-level results of the report. But the bottom line, we filed the highway-byway with FERC, and it was approved with no modifications whatsoever in June of 2010. And the planning process was also approved on the same day. We're happy to say that our planning and cost allocation process was probably one of the things that drove FERC to issue Order 1000. So we're proud to say, I'm not sure I'm proud of that, because it kind of messed up the planning process for us to a certain extent. But it has been used as kind of the foundation for some work that FERC's has ordered to be done across the country. Again, the approval of the ITP and the highway-byway cost allocation has seen more than $5.8 billion in transmission facilities being built, which is a good thing. Without the transmission, the market's not going to work as well as it does today. So this is the membership of the HIP. It's got 2 board members and 2 RSC representatives, as well as a liaison. The liaison is a staff person from the state of Arkansas. 4 reps from the IOUs, 3 co-op reps, a couple of independent, IPPs, independent power producers, a muni, state agency. And state agency is Tom Kent. We were talking about this last night at dinner. And he is the chair. He's from the Nebraska Public Power District, or NPPD. And we've got an independent transmission company, as well as SPP senior staff. Paul Susky, my boss, is the staff secretary for this group. So the focus of HIT is primarily in 3 areas, like I mentioned. They want to look at the generation interconnection process, the queue, aggregate study process, network service, and energy service as well, capacity requirements, and then for planning requirements. They want to look at cost allocation, including highway-byway, the direct assignment of costs, and Z2 credits, which I mentioned earlier. Also the impacts of cost allocation on areas that have a lot of wind, Sunflower in particular. They're a co-op in Kansas they have been complaining about the cost that they're being allocated for wind that's basically moving out of their region, out of their service territory somewhere else. And any disconnects that might happen in planning and operations. Again, this is the scope. Focus on cost allocation, markets, and planning process. You said you guys are following this too, right? We're expected to issue, or the HIT is expected to issue a report next year with high-level recommendations, and then they will, those recommendations, if they're approved, will go down to the various working groups and committees, including the RSC, for them to come up with details. There's a series of problem statements here I'm not going to go over. What they have done to this point is I think they were spending from April to like September just to educate everybody in the different areas and bring everybody up to speed that's on the team so that everybody has the same kind of foundation for trying to address issues. I know that's what's happened up to this point. I think it's September when they said that they want to move into kind of, all right, now let's talk about solutions. And anybody that's got a solution or a solution to suggest is welcome to come and present to the team. We'll see if they issue their report by next April or not. I'd like to see that. It's taking a lot of resources internally. And those are the dates for their face-to-face meetings. They had one yesterday. And they'll have one following the board meeting later this month. So, anyway, questions? Y'all tired? I really appreciate the opportunity to come up, and Nattel, I'd mentioned, Adam, that we probably ought to plan on coming up once a year. And we can go in, we can do this again, or we can do a deeper dive into markets, or planning, or whatever you guys need. We can bring somebody in from settlements to talk about how the money flows, just whatever. But I do appreciate the opportunity.
If you haven't already done so, there are sign-up sheets over here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.